Number two, or if it's custom equipment, that piece of equipment that you will be buying is only customized to what you need, or maybe it has a specific configuration that no one else would be using it. Where the chances are there's not a very high market value of the equipment outside of your own use, so you might have to buy them. Or another category would be those high wear and tear tools. You know that if you buy a wet bench, for example, there's high wear and tear. 5 years later, you try to sell a wet bench, you try to sell some tools, it may not be worth a lot because the cost of refurbishing or even moving this equipment is very high. So there's not much options that you have. If you try to lease them, there might not be many leasing companies who will take a leasing position with this tool. Or sometimes it's just not for the hassle of low value tools. You may just want to end up buying them rather than arranging complex financing. Of course, a lot of times, a lot of our lessees would lease tools as a pool. They may look at, for the next 50 or $100 million type of investment, they want to think about leasing them instead of buying those set of tools. When to outsource? I mean, between buying and not even having it on your factory floor, you may think about outsourcing, right? A lot of times, you might think about the business the process that may not be your core business process, right? For some, maybe wafer bumping. For some, maybe testing itself. You may want to consider outsourcing those functions rather than buying testers or buying wafer bumping equipment into your line. And then that's when you say, instead of buying, you may not even consider leasing them, I may consider outsourcing them. Sometimes it's a question of when there's low tool utilization. There may be a specific cost that you need a specific tool, right? You need not necessarily do them in-house to be outsourcing, right? If someone else can do it cheaper, but not a competitor, right? You probably want to consider outsourcing their particular function. Right. There are many instances. If you look at the year 2000, 2007, it's what we call spikes in capacity. Right. Think about the year 2000. Maybe it's a little bit closer. A lot of times, when we look at the growth and demand in the year 2000, everyone is saying, "Wow, I'm going to need so much more capacity. Let me buy everything." Big mistake, right? In 2008, you suddenly see that the need for those equipment or the need for this capacity suddenly goes away. Right? In the year 2000, same thing happened. And if you go down the history of semiconductor, a lot of times in a high growth situation, people think that that's sustainable, that's the future capacity that I'm going to be needing. Right? So, either spike or an uncertain rise that may not be sustainable, you may want to consider outsourcing those. So, Acuvor is in the business of financing. We're in finance leases, operating leases, and that's what I'm going to come to. When do you lease or rent? Right, I think these are the usual concerns, utilization concerns, when you're not sure how much of these tools you're going to be using. Or when I think about utilization, I think in terms of the number of tools. You may not have to utilize all 20 or 30 pieces of tools on your floor. You may only require now 10, another day 20. It goes up to 30, 2 years from now, it goes back down to 20, etc. Number two is technology concern. Are you going to be keeping this technology for that long a time, or is that going to go away and you're going to have new technology that you're going to replace? Right? Sometimes it's a customer loading concern. The customer comes in and says, I need to ramp up my capacity by 2x in 1 year. Right? Question is, are you going to be buying this capacity just to cater to the particular customer? Another situation is when it makes economic sense. I shall come to this in a while. When does it make economic sense for you to lease versus to buy everything? I think you have to kind of also understand that a dollar is not the same dollar when it's debt versus equity versus operating leases. It's not the same opportunity cost for that dollar. And this is where I'm going to come to. When you get a better return on equity to lease than to buy, where the return expectation between the operators and the owners are different. Right? For the manufacturers, I'll call you guys operators. For guys that own equipment and lease them out to you, we are the owners of the equipment. The return of the ROE expectation of the dollar will be different. I should come to that in a while. Let's take a look first at utilization. Right. On this axis here, right, is number of pieces of equipment. I'm just taking 6 as the maximum number here. Over here, maybe the time frame that you're going to be needing this 6 pieces of equipment. Let's say you buy the first piece and so on and so forth at a different time frame. You buy all these different pieces of equipment. This is when you own them. Now let's look at your capacity rights. Right? It looks like you're doing the right thing. You need this capacity, you buy them before you need the capacity, and so on and so forth. Just at the right time, perfect timing for the investment. And it's going to continue going out, right? You all agree with me? That's the year, let's say, similar to the year 2007. May not be the situation. The situation could be for this particular piece of tool, your need may be coming down. And if you think about the utilization of those tools in the units of systems that you're going to be using, it may be a bell curve. And if I were to kind of try to fit in the best use of cash resources, where anything over 7 years or over 5 years, you should buy them, straightforward, because you get your depreciation is 5 years. After 5 years is zero cost of use, and those between 4 to 5 years of use, you may consider leasing them. And then those that's less, we would highly recommend using. And then there's some capacity spike or certain needs that may not be sustainable, but you still need them for your customer. You may consider outsourcing or having leases. So if I were to kind of say this is a recommendation of how you should use your money. Those that you're going to use long, you can buy them. Those that you're going to use not so long, you can consider leasing, and those that it's going to be just a couple of months need, you may want to consider outsourcing or even turning it into business. Right, the reality is that for any one particular model of equipment that you'll be using, right, over time, right, there are multiple bell curves. It could look like this. Different, if you're a fab, if this is say the ASML 800 some years ago, and then you're gonna have the 1100 come in, and the 1200, right, and the 1400, and the 1700, and the and so on and so forth, right. So it's going to be multiple bell curve. Okay, so it's going to be multiple bell curve, and if you think about this multiple bell curve, you go back to the previous slide, you say there are certain times where I should be very smart about my money. I will buy certain capacity, I will lease certain capacity, because there's always going to be multiple bell curve for every piece of equipment that I'm going to be needing. And it would be rather stupid for me to try to buy equipment that I'm going to use for 3 years or less than 3 or 4 years. Financial motivation, right? This is how I would look at a balance sheet, right? When you start a company, you put money in, that is equity, right? So it comes in different form. You can have initial capitalization, you can use VC's money, you can go through an IPO to raise money, etc. Then you go borrow some money from the bank, right? A lot of times, as an operator, you can only borrow as much money as you have capital. You go to the bank and says, I have $1 million of equity, I want to borrow $5 million. The bank says, excuse me, I think I'll allow you to only borrow up to the next $1 million. Or for that matter, if it's 100 million, we allow you to borrow up to 100 million. This is what we call the leverage ratio of 1:1, or debt to equity of 1:1. So this is how your balance sheet should look like. We're using all this money between equity and liability to buy all your assets. And that gives you a certain return on equity. And when leasing comes in, especially operating leases, right, it's an off-balance sheet instrument. That is, you can have assets that does not appear as your liability on your balance sheet that you can use to also generate business for yourself. This off-balance sheet would be rather useful. And a lot of times we're renting, maybe especially the real estate, the office or the factory that you're using. You're leasing the properties. But equipment, a lot of people like to buy all of them. If you go back to the thinking, there ought to be a certain